A single MiG-29 slipped through the night, and within minutes, an entire convoy worth tens of millions was erased from the map.
4:21 a.m. The Belgorod corridor shook as a streak of white fire cut downward from 28,000 feet. Russian outposts registered a sudden thermal surge, followed by the unmistakable signature of AGM-88E missiles diving at nearly Mach 1.8 toward a moving column hidden beneath the trees. The first blast didn't just break the silence, it shattered the electronic shield protecting a formation stretching over 800 meters, carrying artillery systems valued at more than $83 million. As radar screens flooded with interference and warning sirens echoed across the sector, Blue 117, the lone MiG-29, dropped into a steep descent that would mark the beginning of a chain reaction no one on the ground was prepared to face. Before we continue, if you witnessed that initial strike tearing open the darkness, what would you expect to happen next? Share your thoughts below. 3:52 a.m. The Belgorod corridor lay silent beneath a thin veil of drifting mist. The ground was dry, the air sharp, and the forest canopy looked like a dark ocean frozen in place. But high above that stillness, something moved. At 21,000 feet, a single thermal flicker appeared on a Russian early warning radar, so faint and unstable that the system flagged it as environmental noise. Operators leaned closer, uncertain. For 7 seconds, the trace vanished entirely. Then it reappeared, brighter, sharper, too deliberate to be nature. It wasn't a bird, it wasn't clutter. It was a MiG-29. The jet glided in passive mode, all active sensors cold, relying only on an optical infrared suite mounted beneath its fuselage. It was a reconnaissance pass disguised as a ghost, not a weapon fired, not a sound broken, only the slow gathering of signatures hidden below the trees. When the Russians realized what they were seeing, it was already too late. A Panzer S-2 battery spun to life, launching two 57 E-6 interceptors into the darkness. The missiles climbed fast, carving twin spirals across the sky. But at 8,000 feet, the MiG-29 dropped into a steep displacement roll, sliding sideways through the radar lobe and letting both missiles overshoot harmlessly into the upper cloud layer. No triumph, no counterstrike. Just a single jet cutting its way back toward the horizon. But before it disappeared, its sensors captured something extraordinary, a thermal band nearly 600 meters long, the signature of multiple heavy vehicles traveling through the Belgorod woods. Engines idling low, movement controlled, formation tight. Kiev had been waiting for a sign. This was it. At 3:57 a.m., Operation Falling Horizon shifted from theory to execution. And the first line of a much larger battle had just been drawn. 4:16 a.m. The eastern edge of Belgorod lit up with 3 vertical streaks of exhaust rising through the low clouds like spears of white fire. Russian command had reacted faster than expected. A trio of Su-30SM interceptors roared into the night, sweeping the corridor with long-range Bars-R radar beams, searching for whatever had slipped past their networks moments earlier. But they weren't alone in the sky. 2 MiG-29s from Ukraine's 114th Tactical Aviation Brigade crossed the border at 24,000 feet, flying a staggered offset designed to confuse early warning filters. They carried no heavy munitions, only lightning reconnaissance pods, silent lenses meant to peel open the darkness and expose whatever was moving below the canopy. The Russians fired first. A pair of R-77 air-to-air missiles sliced upward at nearly Mach 3, closing the gap in seconds. But the MiG pilots executed a synchronized low-altitude break, diving from 20,000 feet to 4,000 in less than 9 seconds. Russian radar lost lock instantly. It wasn't a dogfight. It was a race for information. And Ukraine won it. Through the mist, the lightning pods captured a pattern impossible to ignore. A convoy stretching almost 800 meters, moving at 48 miles per hour, supported by a command truck radiating short bursts of encrypted traffic. Even more alarming, a mobile electronic warfare unit trailing behind, broadcasting narrowband jamming every 11 seconds. That meant the convoy was important. Too important to let reach the front. Before we go deeper, If you were watching that radar screen, seeing the formation emerge piece by piece, what would you think was coming next? Tell me below. At 4:21 a.m., the data streamed back to Kiev. And in the operations room, one conclusion became unavoidable. The real strike, the one that would shape the morning, would belong to a single MiG-29 waiting in the shadows of Chapter 3. 4:35 a.m. The upper air over Belgorod vibrated with a low, rising hum. It came from a single aircraft climbing through a dark corridor of scattered clouds. MiG-29, Blue 117, running light, carrying one purpose. The jet leveled off at 28,000 feet. Its nose pointed directly toward a section of forest where the convoy now moved in a rigid line. What happened next would dictate the next 12 hours of fighting across the entire sector. Below the treetops, the formation stretched farther than analysts expected. 14 PLZ-05 self-propelled guns, each weighing more than 30 tons. 22 logistics carriers loaded with ammunition crates and fuel drums. One mobile EW truck transmitting pulses across a 40-kilometer radius. The combined value was staggering. Over $83 million in hardware, advancing through a strip of land normally used for seasonal supply runs. Blue 117's sensors locked onto the EW vehicle first. The jet rolled into a dive, 65 degrees, accelerating past 600 knots. At 13,000 feet, the pilot released two AGM-88E missiles that streaked downward in perfect alignment. A luminous ripple shot through the valley as the EW truck's emissions vanished, leaving the entire convoy electronically exposed. The MiG didn't pull away, it pushed deeper. Dropping to 1,000 feet, Blue 117 armed a cluster of JDAM-ER precision weapons, each programmed with separate thermal signatures extracted from reconnaissance feeds. 4 detonations erupted across the convoy's axis, cutting the formation into isolated segments. Engines stalled. Movement halted. The road became a chain of disabled machinery trapped beneath a canopy of drifting smoke Russian forces attempted to counter. A K-52 lifted from a nearby base, thermal sensors searching for the attacker. But the interference created by the AGM-88s generated a wandering blind sector, forcing the helicopter to retreat rather than risk entering the unstable corridor. In less than 180 seconds, the operation's decisive strike had unfolded. The timberline glowed with rising heat columns, and the once intact convoy now lay scattered across the forest track. Its momentum broken, its purpose erased. Blue 117 climbed back into the quiet sky, leaving behind the opening shockwave of a battle that was far from over. 4:48 a.m. A muted haze drifted over the Belgorod tree line, rising in long, wavering pillars. The strike from Blue 117 had lasted barely 3 minutes, but the aftermath carried the weight of an hour. Heat signatures pulsed across the valley floor, a half-kilometer arc of disabled machinery. Each echo captured by orbiting reconnaissance satellites as the region's electromagnetic map shifted violently. Russian command reacted immediately. An Il-20M electronic intelligence aircraft launched from Belgorod north, flying at 22,000 feet, sweeping its antennas in a wide search pattern. But every pass returned distorted telemetry. The residual interference from the destroyed EW vehicle formed an unstable, static corridor, bending signals and creating pockets of blind airspace that stretched more than 11 kilometers along the forest edge. Ukraine took advantage of the opening. A second pair of MiG-29s, call signs Gray 14 and Gray 21, crossed into the sector at medium altitude, escorting Blue 117's withdrawal route. Their radars ran on low probability of intercept modes, feeding data back to a command node near Kharkiv. From above, the strike zone resembled a fractured landscape of metallic silhouettes, each radiating warm air but producing no coordinated movement. Russia attempted to restore air dominance. A Su-34 ascended from a southern base armed with precision glide munitions intended to neutralize any lingering Ukrainian aircraft. But as it neared the interference band, its sensors flickered, first dimly, then in full blackout, forcing the crew to pull back rather than risk committing blind into a corrupted airspace. For a brief window, the sky belonged to no one, not Russia, not Ukraine, just an expanse held open by the shockwave of a single strike. Inside Kiev's operations room, analysts began reconstructing the satellite returns frame by frame. What they found, signal gaps, shifting heat plumes, erratic comms traffic, suggested that the convoy's destruction was only the first fracture in a larger tactical collapse. The next phase would not be about a single attack. It would be about the consequences rippling outward, tightening around the entire northern front. 5:22 a.m. The tactical map of northern Ukraine shifted for the first time in weeks, not because of territory gained, but because of something far more disruptive. The sudden disappearance of a convoy worth more than $83 million. A loss that rippled through Russia's northern logistics chain like a snapped tension cable. In the Belgorod sector, frontline units felt the impact immediately. Artillery crews awaiting PLZ-05 reinforcements reported silence on encrypted channels that were normally active every 30 minutes. Drone operators scanning the Pisky-Vovchansk corridor detected 27 separate signal dropouts in just 1 hour, an anomaly only seen when a command node is missing or offline. Even ground radars along the Karacha belt showed faint gaps where overlapping coverage once existed. Ukraine moved quickly. Recon teams along the border advanced 1 to 2 kilometers into previously contested buffer zones, marking grid squares that had resisted movement for months. They found abandoned fuel caches, scattered tire tracks, and a curious absence of radio discipline. All signs of a sector reacting without coordination. Meanwhile, in Moscow, the shock was far deeper. Internal reports circulated quietly between senior officers. Concerns that Chinese-supplied systems were too vulnerable to air-delivered electronic attacks. Questions about whether the route had been compromised days earlier. And the most sensitive issue of all, why an entire logistics column could vanish without a single distress transmission. For Russia's Northern Command, the loss wasn't just about equipment. It was about timing. The destroyed convoy had been scheduled to reinforce the Kharkiv line within 12 hours. Without it, artillery parity dissolved Ukrainian forces using older but well-coordinated batteries, gained a temporary firing advantage across a 12-kilometer span of the front. On Kiev's screens, analysts traced the cascading effects. Comms interruptions, repositioned battalions, slowed supply intervals. The pattern was unmistakable. The strike from Blue 117 hadn't ended a mission. It had tilted the entire battle space and the shockwave was still expanding. 6:04 a.m. The first full-spectrum satellite pass from the west cut across the Belgorod corridor, revealing the aftermath with unsettling clarity. The forested road that once carried a reinforced column now showed a thermal scar nearly 900 meters long, punctuated by dark metallic shapes cooling unevenly. No movement. No engine heat, only a fractured line where a supply artery had ceased to exist. For Russian command, the implications surfaced before the images finished downloading. In 3 separate districts, artillery fire schedules slipped by 20 to 40 minutes, a delay unheard of during peak operational hours. Fuel convoys rerouted through secondary roads saw transit times double. Even short-range communication hubs, normally synchronized by regional command, registered 46 mismatched timestamps across a single hour, proof that the Northern Control Network was struggling to re-establish order. Ukraine monitored each anomaly in silence. Analysts at Kiev's Joint Operations Center tracked how the absence of the PLZ-05 battalion reshaped the entire northern line. Without fresh barrels and ammunition stockpiles, Russian batteries reduced fire rates by nearly 30%. Opening narrow windows where Ukrainian brigades advanced into lightly defended ridges. Small gains, measured in hundreds of meters, but significant in a sector long frozen by parity. Far beyond the front, the political echo traveled even faster. In Moscow, senior officers confronted an uncomfortable truth. The first major delivery of foreign artillery support had dissolved before firing a single shot. Questions multiplied about routing, about electronic shielding, about the vulnerability of mixed manufacturer supply chains. None had immediate answers, but one reality stood above the rest: a lone MiG-29, flying without fanfare, had dismantled an entire logistical bridge worth over $83 million and forced a recalibration of the northern campaign, not through overwhelming force, but through timing, precision, and an understanding of how fragile modern supply webs truly are. The sun crept over the eastern ridgeline, and with it, the horizon of the conflict had undeniably shifted. As dawn rose over the northern corridor, the final satellite frames confirmed everything. One precise strike had fractured a supply line, stalled an advance, and forced an entire sector to reset its footing. A single MiG-29 had shifted the balance without ever being seen. If this operation were unfolding before your eyes, which moment would stay with you the most?